Alright, so I finished 13 Sentinels, and spoiler cast? I don't know. Like, I would, if to make any sense of the end, of like the ending and everything that happened, like, you would basically need a full plot synopsis, because it actually doesn't make any sense. But, like, this is like one of the best stories in any thing I've ever seen. Like, not even video game stories, not even by the standards of video game stories. I mean, like, stories in general. Like, in the whole, like, spectrum of science fiction media, this is probably one of the best ones I've ever experienced. And it's one of those ones where, like, it only works as a game. Like, you might think, oh, just adapt it into an... Like, you could adapt this into an anime. But, like, not really, because the experience of playing the game is, like, integral to the kind of story that it is. Because for most of the story, it's like a mystery. Where you have the 13 characters, and all of them get, like, slices. All of them get different chunks of what's actually going on, and you have to put all of those together in order to get the full picture. And you can figure it out, but you're gonna think you have it figured out and be wrong like 50 times by the time you get to the end. Because when the game first starts out, you think, oh, I get it. But then no, you don't get it. It turns out it was something... Until you get to the end, and it's like, you could not have predicted that. That shit, like, literally came out of... Like, it was so set up, you could come to that conclusion, but then it just, like, throws a curveball, and you're like, what the fuck? And the way the story, like, reveals itself as you're going through, because there's the 13 characters, and you can pick whichever one you want to play as and go through their story as you're going along. But then there's certain points where we'll be like, okay, you can't continue with this character until you've done this other thing. You have to witness this story moment before you, with this character, before you can continue. But until you get to that, like, lock-off point, you can play as whichever character you want at any point that you want, and go with them as far as you want to. So, like, I liked sticking with a character until it forced me out, basically, and says you can't continue with this character. But you can, like, you could easily play the game going like, okay, this character, okay, that scene happened, move on to the next character. Okay, that scene happened, move on to the next character. Okay, that scene happened, move on to the next character. Okay, that scene happened, move on. Like, that could, that's not what I did, but you could easily have that experience getting the story, like, bit by bit, character by jumping back and forth across all of these different stories. And then there's times where the game will be like, okay, no, you have to actually go, like, do the RTS. You have to go do the strategy combat now before you can continue at all. And, like, one of the hypest moments for me was, like, when the last character unlocked, when Renya Goto was unlocked, and it's like, you can play as him now. I was like, oh shit, he's the key holder. He knows everything that's going on. So I want to play as him right away. You do his prologue, and then it immediately locks him out and says, you cannot play as this character again until you finished every single other character story mode first. And that's how you know. That's when I was like, oh shit, this guy has all the answers. You're not getting the answers until you've done everyone else's story, because he's the one who knows what's going on. Like, if you wanted to, like, rank this game in terms of how many times it had me going, oh, shit, what? Then it's a 10 out of 10. Like, if you like, have a fucking gradient chart, like an escalating chart of, like, holy shit, hype as fuck, this is a 10 out of 10. Like, right, like, Vanillaware knocked it out of the park. Yet another perfect game. Vanillaware batting 1,000. What had this has been the weirdest, right? Yeah, because like George Kamitami started out working at Capcom, making that Dungeons and Dragons arcade machine, and then he's like, I'm gonna start my own thing because I like drawing big titties and food. I'm gonna make a game studio with a bunch of my other friends who also like drawing big titties and food. And so they released Princess Crown was their first game, right? On the PSP. We never got that in English. Was it Princess Crown or Odin Sphere? Which one came out first? Let me double check. Let me ruin this video by double checking. Vanillaware. By the way, they remastered Princess Crown for the PS4, and if you bought the game in Japan, you got that for free. I'm really pissed. I wonder if they started selling that separately. I would buy it on the Japanese PSN if it was released separately. What the fuck is Fantasy Earth: The Ring of Dominion? This is fucking English-ass Wikipedia. Doesn't even have Princess Crown on here. Dumb fucks. Yeah, Princess Crown. Oh, it wasn't even Vanillaware at the time. He was just working for Atlas. Okay, so Princess Crown, and then the first real Vanillaware game was Grimoire, which is funny because like you when 13 Sentinels was coming out, everyone was like, "What? A strategy game? I want like why isn't it a side-scrolling beat 'em up? Why is it a strategy game? That's a weird genre change." But Grimoire was a strategy game. They totally did it. And then Odin Sphere, and then Muramasa, and then Grand Knight's History, and then Dragon's Crown. Not a bad game out of the bunch. They've been really knocking it out of the park with every single game. Low-key, Vanillaware is like way more on their game, on point, compared to like other contemporary Japanese studios. I do think, like, the story plot, like, the adventure game element of the game is definitely the main allure of the game compared to the actual gameplay, because the game's split up between, like, 40% game and then 60% interactive story. And I finally know how to actually explain what the game is. Because before the game came out, I was like, what even is this game? Show me the gameplay. What is the game? What is the game here? And I finally know how to actually describe it. It's half adventure game, a la in the same vein as Telltale games. Like Telltale's The Walking Dead. It's that style of adventure game where you are a character and you're wandering around this enclosed environment and you can talk to other characters. You can't choose dialogue options, but they will remember that you said that. And occasionally, well, actually you can kind of choose dialogue options, but it's more like a puzzle where you have to choose the right dialogue option to say to them. Only it's Telltale style puzzle where you know, oh, I have to use this item on this individual because the game tells you you have to use this item on this individual. Like, you don't have in The Walking Dead, you didn't have, like, a full inventory, and you gotta rub everything in your inventory against the lock to see what opens the door. The game would just, you would mouse over the door, and then it would show an icon for that item that you have in your inventory, and then you'd use it. It's a puzzle in the loosest sense of the term, and that's the style of gameplay that the adventure game side of 13 Sentinels has. A lot of people are going to be calling this visual novel, and it's literally I'm sick of people calling things visual novels. For one thing, visual novel is a dumbass fucking genre name. That's not what they call them in Japan. In Japan, they're just adventure games, which is way more accurate because it is still just the same kind of game as, say, The Secret of Monkey Island or the Telltale games like The Walking Dead. It's that same kind of game. It's just portrayed differently, but the gameplay is exactly the same. The entire conceit of a game being a visual novel is just this, like, fucking crusade that I'm on that I fucking hate so much. It's an adventure game. Any metric of what you would define as being a visual novel, I will fight you on, but this game does not meet any of those criteria. So shut the fuck up. And then the other percentage is a turn-based strategy, but with an ATB timer rather than being actually turn-based. It has instead of it being your turn, okay, now the enemy's turn, okay, now your turn, okay, now the enemy's turn. It uses the ATB gauge from Final Fantasy 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if you remember the ATB gauge and like the cooldown timer in Final Fantasy 7, that's the style of turn-based that this is, where your character, like, you move them or have them do a move, and then they're on a cooldown. And once the cooldown fills back up, you can use them again. Until that cooldown fills back up, the enemy can move around and do whatever they want to do while you're sitting there waiting for the cooldown to fill back up. So it's turn-based strategy. It's a turn-based strategy game with ATB combat, with an ATB timer. So it's half adventure game, half turn-based strategy with ATB. There you go. That's all I needed to hear. No one knows how to actually communicate what games are anymore. No one has the fucking language or the frame of reference to explain what games are. Because we live in the age of it's the Dark Souls or Persona of whatever. That's why I saw people saying, like, 13 Sentinels is the Persona Vanillaware game. It's like, it's an adventure game, and it has turn-based strategy. It's not even real-time strategy. Grim War was a real-time strategy. This is just turn-based, but with an ATB gauge. You would not say Final Fantasy IV isn't turn-based strategy. It's the same kind of turn-based strategy as Final Fantasy IV. So imagine Front Mission, but with the ATB gauge, and that's the gameplay. That's all I needed to hear. In fact, I talked about it in the video that I did, but I really liked that it kind of put a twist on traditional turn-based strategy, where in traditional turn-based strategy, like Front Mission or in like Final Fantasy Tactics, it's a grid. It's all a grid system, and you like move them like one square at a time, and your attacks can hit in whatever amount of squares that are in front or behind you, or Disgaea, like that. In 13 Sentinels, your characters move along the city streets of the city of Tokyo, and the streets are laid out in a grid system because it's a city, so it's using a city grid system. So it is grid-based, but you're navigating the streets which are laid out in a grid-based city design. So I thought that was really cute, and I knew, like, that has to be intentional. So I thought that was adorable, that, like, it is grid-based. It's just because cities are laid out as grids. I thought that was really cute. In terms of the strategy combat, it's definitely the weakest part. I don't not like it. It's just, you can kind of feel the effort. I don't know effort so much as, like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it just wasn't the priority or if they didn't know what they were doing with it. I couldn't begin to guess, but it's definitely the weaker part of the game. It's not the draw. No one's gonna recommend 13 Sentinels because, like, hey man, you like Front Mission? better get into this because it's got that turn-based strategy combat. Like, no. Get the fuck out of there. Like, it's fine. It's not bad. That's all gameplay needs to be. I will be on this I will be on this fucking hill, and I won't get off it. You don't have to have good gameplay. You just have to have not shitty gameplay. That's all it needs to do. All the gameplay of a game needs to do is be good enough that it isn't a fucking chore, pain in the ass. Get out of there. My cat is eating this fucking... Look, she's eating the bubble wrap. Look at that. She's eating the fucking bubble wrap. What the fuck is the matter with you? You're not getting soups. Yeah, it took the other one away too, idiot. All gameplay needs to be is good enough to not piss you off and make you want to stop playing. That's all. As long as gameplay is serviceable, that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be good. The gameplay being good, is an asset and a benefit, and a game having exceptionally good gameplay can be a big selling point. But it doesn't matter. Like, the gameplay being so, like, it's really like it's a case-by-case basis kind of thing, but as long as the gameplay isn't actively being like, fuck this game, I don't want to play this shit anymore, then it's fine, because why are you here? We're here for the story. We're really here, like, 13 Sentinels is a game where you're really showing up for this story. I don't think that's a bad thing to admit. Like, the reason to play the game is because the story is so fucking good. That's why you're here. And the gameplay is also fine. It's fine. 5 out of 10 gameplay, 10 out of 10 story, right? It all evens out. A game can have, like, a non-existent story, but the gameplay is really there to get you where you need to go. But if you have a game that's just, like, average gameplay, perfectly average, normal, mundane gameplay, and a shit story, then it's not worth it. It's really not worth it. Take Parasite Eve 3, aka The Third Birthday. Perfectly average, serviceable, not a humdrum, mundane, not at all terrible, but nothing to write home about gameplay. So you're sitting there playing Third Birthday, dealing with this totally normal, fine 5 out of 10 gameplay in order to endure a fucking 0 out of 10 story. It's not worth it. No one's gonna play Third Birthday for the gameplay. But then, like, take something... I can't be asked to think of other examples right now. The point is, the gameplay it has merit, but it's definitely not the appeal. It's definitely not the core appeal. Although, I mean, it's also super fucking easy. This is a really easy game. Like, I was playing on the hardest difficulty on every mission. I was S ranking every single mission first try until the last level. The second to last level. Like, the final boss fight, the second to last strategy fight, that was bullshit. It literally, like, I wasn't losing. I wasn't, like, going to die, but it was literally just half an hour of, like, chipping away, of doing chip damage. Imagine just, like, you're fighting a guy in a fighting game, and all he's doing is blocking, and you can't do a throw, and you're just doing chip damage the entire fight. Eventually, you will win. You are not in danger of losing. But it seriously took, like, half an hour before I was like, fuck this. I just want to see the end of the story. Up until that point, it was just clean sweeps the entire map. Although, there is, like, an optimal strategy to the game. If you want to sleepwalk through this fucking game and not even think about it, you can even hit all of the secret missions by doing this strategy. upgrade Iori, Fuyusaka, and Shinanome's sentry guns, and then upgrade the Gen 4 Sentinels, Yuki, Megumi, Genya, and Shu, and give them interceptors and upgrade those, and then just spam interceptors and sentry guns, sit back, watch the gameplay itself. Just spam interceptors and sentry guns. You can sleepwalk through every single mission in the entire fucking game until that last one. That last one's a little bit, like, it's doable. I like, you can go in with, I think the best way to do that mission would be to go in with 2 sentry gun. Like, Ryoko's the best sentry gun. Shinonome is the best sentry gun user because she can deploy 2 sentry guns at the same time. And then Iori's a second runner-up because she has a really fast cooldown when you deploy a sentry gun. She has special abilities, passive abilities that benefit her using sentry guns. And then I would say Shu and maybe Genya for Gen 4, and then the other 2 are you gotta go in there with Neji, Ogata, and I would say Hijiyama. Although, you can do Sekigahara or Hijiyama, and then I bet you could just pulverize that fucking boss. Goddamn, he was chip damage. But if you went in there with 2 first-gen Sentinels, did the limit break, and then just started beating the shit out of it, I bet it would go a lot better. Anyway. The main allure of the game is definitely the story, and if you like sci-fi, if you like science fiction stories, this is a must fucking play. And don't watch, I don't know. I would say, don't watch a fucking playthrough on YouTube, but it is a PS4 exclusive, so... But, the story is done a disservice by not playing it. By engaging with it passively and just watching someone else's playthrough, you're doing yourself and the story a disservice. Because the real allure of the story is being able to choose which character you want to play as at what time and when and how you want to experience the story, and really engaging with it and trying to solve the mystery and figure out, when did this happen in relation to these other events? Because that's the thing. The game is presented as a time travel story, and you think, oh, okay, so, there's, events that happened in 1945, there's events that happened in 1985, there's events that happened in, 2100, there's events that happen, far into the future, and you think, oh, okay, eventually we can pull the picture back and see, a chronological, view. That's the thing. For the longest time, I was thinking, there is a linear sequence of events, but it is not chronological. Because chronological would be 1945 to 1985 to 2020 to 2060. 2080? I'm going off the top of my head. So you think, okay, it's not chronological, but there is a linear sequence where the characters, do something in 2020, and then time travel back to 1945, and then do something in 1945. So the linear story goes from 2020 to 1945. So you can't follow it chronologically, but there is a linear sequence. But then that turns out not to be the case. And it turns out, no, the game is totally chronological. It is portrayed in a chronological sequence. And you're like, oh, fuck, that's one of the big, holy shit moments of the game. There's so many moments where you're trying to figure it out and you think you might have a handle on it, and then one new piece of information is given to you, and you're the curtain is pulled back and you realize you had no fucking idea what was going on. And what's funny is a lot of the characters in the game don't know what the fuck is going on. There's like 3 characters who know everything, who have the full picture, and the 10 other characters are working on incomplete information, and some of them don't know fucking anything. Some of them are totally in the dark and are just fucking running around punching things and have no fucking clue. But yeah, this game takes every science fiction story, every science fiction concept that you've ever heard of in your life, and does it all. Everything from War of the Worlds to Godzilla to E.T. to 2001: A Space Odyssey to The Matrix to fucking Terminator. Like, everything. Every single sci-fi movie, story, concept that you've ever heard of. Like, all the way up to fucking all the way up to Godzilla, Pacific Rim, to other video games, to, like, it references, like, other video games and stuff. It's incredible. It's the ultimate example of, like, because it's totally shameless, too, about showing its influences. There will be characters in the story going like, oh shit, that's a killer robot coming to kill us. Oh, you mean like the Terminator? Yeah, just like the Terminator. Have you seen the Terminator? It's just like that. One character's story is just him going like, oh man, I watched Star Wars the other night. What a great movie. Oh man, I watched, what the fuck is it called? I think it was Terminator. There's a movie where no, not Terminator. I think it's some Japanese movie, actually. But there's a movie where, like, some guy gets teleported onto a bridge, and like, he references that. And another character shows up and is like, hey guys, I was reading The War of the Worlds last night by that really famous author, because War of the Worlds is public domain, but H.G. Wells is fucking copyrighted shit, and H.G. Wells' estate is gonna sue your ass. And she's like, man, I was just watching E.T. last night. This is just like E.T. Like, every character's story, like, starts with the premise of a a pre-existing sci-fi movie. Like, there's one character who's like, their story starts out as being E.T. Their story is E.T. the extraterrestrial at first. And then it goes into a completely different direction. There's a character who their story is the girl who leapt through time, but then it goes in a completely other direction. There's a character whose story is Final Destination, but then it goes into a completely different direction. And that's how you do it. You're because it's so shameless about saying, like, this is what our influence is, this is what we're inspired by, this is what we're shamelessly taking from and homaging, and like, we're writing off of the same lane that this movie tread, but then we're gonna take that as our foundation and then tell our own unique story and do our own original thing with it. That's how you do it. That's how you do the thing. They're not even hiding it, because they're literally going like, hey, so this story is inspired by E.T. and War of the Worlds, but we're gonna take that basic foundation, that premise, and do our own unique original thing with it. Until eventually, as the story starts going along, it gets further and further, like, towards the conclusion, the scope has been pulled back so much that you're like this tangled spider web of bullshit that you're just like trying to keep everything straight, and who knows what, and when did they figure this out, and why are they doing that? Is it because they know this, or do they think that that is a lie? Or, like, they think that something's true, and it turns out that isn't true, but because they think that, they're doing this, and that's causing this other character to believe this, and that means that they do that, and that affects this other character's story. And it just gets to the point where it's like, you seriously need to put up, like, a Jill Valentine style conspiracy board with pictures of people and, like, red yarn tied between them to keep this shit straight. There's an entire menu option in the game that's literally just like, here's this shit that this person mentioned. Here's what it means. Here are the details of when this was explained, summarized, so that you can just keep track of it. And I don't have a problem keeping track of that kind of thing, but this is a really convoluted story that I can easily see a lot of people getting, like, really tripped up and confused about. After beating the game, like, as I was going along, like, right until the ending, I was like, I'm pretty sure I know everything that's going on, and there's just one or two things I'm a little unsure about. And then by the time the game finishes, by the time the credits roll, I was pretty reasonably like, okay, I know everything that happened. I don't think there were any plot holes or anything that was left unexplained. There weren't even really any, like, story contrivances or or conveniences or artistic or, like, things that just went completely unexplained or didn't make sense in retrospect. It's really tight. Like, it's really convoluted and confusing to swim through and try and figure out as you're experiencing it. But once that final piece clicks into place and you see the truth, and there's literally an unlockable that's like the truth. And it's like, and now you know everything that's going on, it's really easy to look back and say, like, oh, that made perfect sense, and I totally understand why that character did that now. And because they didn't know, but they thought they knew, but they didn't. And all this other shit. It was such, like, I've never had so much fun trying to figure out some bullshit This is the kind of shit that Metal Gear Solid wishes it could do. This is the kind of, like, crazy conspiracy theory, like, multi-layered detective mystery story, like, science fiction crazy bullshit plot that you can only get from, like, having a sci-fi story. What a fucking great game. Strong competitor for Bug Fables' throne as Game of the Year 2020. I would still say Bug Fables is my Game of the Year 2020, but that's strong because it really brought the heat with its gameplay, and 13 Sentinels, not the strongest in terms of gameplay. Didn't, like, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but I would say the gameplay is a 5 out of 10. Totally average, it's fine, there's nothing to complain about in terms of its gameplay. I can't say a single negative thing about 13 Sentinels' strategy gameplay. But I can't say anything like it's not 10 out of 10 gameplay. It's not like a mind-blowing strategy gameplay or anything like that. And that's not a bad thing, but it doesn't distinguish itself. It doesn't do anything special or unique or even, like, exemplary. And Vanillaware's done strategy before. That, like, Grand Knight's History and Grim Grimoire. Grim Grimoire isn't very good, but because that was more like a 2D StarCraft, basically. Grand Knight's History is really good. And then they made Vanillaware employees made Grand Knight's Kingdom, and that's also really good. But yeah, fucking 13 Sentinels.